Normally, when you're spelunking through the Mariana Trench for laptops, the bottom 17 options are some abominable form of Chromebook that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. But this is tied for the cheapest laptop I could find at my local Best Buy, and it's not a Chromebook, it's got Windows on it, which means I can run some proper games on it, which should go really poorly. But before we do that, today's video is sponsored by the voluptuous new Be Quiet Lightbase 600 LX. Now usually with these sponsor spots, I like to point out a feature I really like about the product. But with the 600 LX, building in it is like a little treasure hunt of amazing features. Like the 2 included RGB fan hubs, and this is my favorite, the front panel connector is a solid connector, which should be illegal not to do in cases in my opinion. There's a really nicely implemented GPU anti-sag bracket, and if you want to use it on its side, you can just easily twist off the bottom feet, which is really nice. Honestly, I could go on for ages, or you could get your own using the link down below and discover the magnificence yourself. Now, the fact that this suspiciously cheap laptop is a Lenovo is actually a really good sign. A while ago, I had a look at a similarly priced, I think, Lenovo Chromebook, which was surprisingly decent. There's the laptop. It is bigger than that Chromebook was. Ooh, it's so tiny. Now, in terms of accessories, we get just the little power brick, which is super cute, so tiny, with its Mickey Mouse ear plug. And it's a little 45-watt power brick, which just shows the immense power we're working with here. Wait, what? That is a highly unusual warning. Do they think I'm just gonna accidentally swallow it? It would make sense if I was a sperm whale, but I don't think I'm one of those. Ooh, it's so shiny. Now, aside from it being shiny, in terms of build quality, it uses the kind of plastic you'd expect to find in your 3-year-old's Easy Bake Oven, which is to be expected at this price point. And to be fair, considering that it's a Lenovo, it might be cheap plastic, but it feels sturdy enough. It doesn't feel like it's gonna break if you sneeze at it. In terms of I/O, I am very excited to announce that we've got a full-sized SD card slot on this thing, which, as we all know, is the SD form factor of the Sex Hammer. Aside from the full-size SD slot, we've got a couple of what looks like USB 3 ports, and it's even got a USB-C port on it, which is pretty cool, and we get full-sized HDMI and a microphone headphone jack. So again, for the price and what this thing is kind of intended for, it's got a pretty complete I/O. Now, before we check out like the keyboard and stuff, there is something interesting on the bottom. This panel looks pretty easy to remove, although, considering the specs of the laptop, I don't think there's going to be much point removing it, but we'll have a look at that a bit later in the video. Aside from that, it doesn't use Phillips head screws, so you'll need like an iFixit kit or whatever to get into here. And when you peek through the ventilation, there's what looks like actual cooling, which is some more foreshadowing of the power. And then below that, we've got some down-firing speakers. Next, we need to see if it passes the very important one-hand open test, which it very much doesn't. Now, I've had people say that this test is stupid because according to them, they feel like if a laptop opens one-handed, its hinge is going to be too flimsy, but that's kind of the point. A good hinge can open one-handed, but then is also sturdy enough to stay in the correct position when you have it open and stuff. So it's not just about it opening one-handed. So this fails the first part of that test, but it's a reasonably stiff feeling hinge. So, you know, when you actually get it into a position, it wobbles a little bit, but once it's done with its initial wobble, yeah, that's fine. This is a reasonable hinge for the price. Now, when it comes to the keyboard, oh no, that's a Joker 2 keyboard right there. It's terrible. Just below a certain price point, the keyboards get a real, like, hollow plastic thud to the keystrokes, which feels pretty terrible. But I mean, in terms of layout, the keyboard looks decent, and you're going to be using it to type in like passwords on websites and stuff, I imagine. Although, you don't get a numpad, so you can't be like an Excel bro with this, unfortunately. The trackpad is a reasonable size, and it feels pretty good as well. So for the price, that's not a terrible feeling trackpad. Now, above all of this, we have our 14-inch display, which I would be very surprised if it's 1080p. It's probably like 768p or whatever. And interestingly, in very Lenovo fashion, you get a way to hide your webcam. Oh. But other than that, I don't think there's a lot more we can say about this before firing it up. So, let's do that. But before we do that, let's jump to the future, pop the back off, and see what's under this voluptuous booty. Now, while I take this back off, I am gonna wager that there is nothing serviceable under here in terms of like storage and memory. There are some things in the specs which does hint at that. But unfortunately, once unscrewed, you really have to violence the back off. Oh no, there's nothing hiding, but wow! You can not only drop an additional stick of RAM in here, which I wasn't expecting at all, but you can even drop some more storage in here, which is surprising to me because as standard, this laptop comes with 128 gigs of eMMC storage, which is soldered down. Now the cooling is interesting because I don't think this has a fan underneath it. It doesn't look like it does. I mean, do I take it off? Yeah, I think I'm gonna take it off. Let's dig a little deeper. Wow, that's it? That's the whole heatsink? It's not even a heatsink, it's just a sheet of, I mean, I'm assuming that's aluminium. The fact that this manages to cool this Celeron just gives you an indication of how wildly powerful it is. I feel like even just the heat pipe is more cooling surface area than this little bit. Wow. One of the dies on the CPU doesn't even have thermal paste on it. But with that brief look at the guts of the system, let's fire it up before discussing the specs. The startup process took so long, it gave my mind ample time to start wandering. Now I'm kind of expecting pretty much no venereal disease on this laptop because it runs Windows 11 S, which, yeah, I feel like pumping a bunch of McAfee on this is just gonna undo all of that lightweightening of the operating system. Speaking of venereal disease, subscribing to Dawid Does Tech Stuff cures at least 3 strains, and I'm talking from experience. Wow, the display is butt cheeks. Look at that off-axis performance. With my mind now having relieved itself of all of its thoughts, the waiting became unbearable. The update process of the laptop stretching into the depths of time and space. Eventually, all measurements of duration ceased to have meaning, and we arrived at the heat death of the universe. Yet still, the laptop was updated. Oh, it's finished! Neat. Oh, I was right. This is a pristine install of Windows. Look at that. And I mean, that's kind of the point of Mode S in Windows 11. The S here is standing not for speed or sport, but sterile, I guess. Which makes sense, considering that this laptop not only packs a measly 4 gigs of RAM, but that 4 gigs feeds an Intel Celeron N4500, a dual-core 1-ish GHz CPU, which is so powerful that the mere act of launching Task Manager gets it as frazzled as that time I got maced for public indecency. Now, getting back to S mode Windows, the problem with it is that you can only download apps from the Microsoft App Store, which hugely limits the usability of the device. So I had to turn it off to be able to install things like Steam and MSI Afterburner. And the first thing that happens is a McAfee pop-up. That's so funny. The moment you switch out of S mode, that happens. And after politely rejecting McAfee's advances, I spent another couple eons installing Steam so that we could try gaming on this thing. Oh, that's already going very well. I mean, on the bright side, the temperatures are very good. Okay, I think we finally loaded in. Now, one of the big benefits of the lower resolution display that we have in here is we don't need to run the games at 1080p. I then spent the third eternity at this point, for those of you keeping track at home, setting up the settings in the game, low settings at the native resolution of the display. Then I did a whole bunch more waiting to get into the gameplay, which was magnificent. Now, hear me out. You know, this is running between 3 and 5 frames per second. But this is actually a lot better than I was expecting. And I think the reason that it's running better than I was expecting is because we're not running at 1080p. Oh, bad stuff happened there. Yeah, just lots of bad stuff. Damn, this isn't even 1080p that this is happening at. And again, It's one of those fun situations where we have a CPU bottlenecking its own iGPU. But this is just a really, really wild example of it, because look at that. We've got, like, at times 0% GPU utilization because the iGPU is spending so much time waiting for the CPU. Oh, there's a bot here. Now, in all fairness to the little Celeron, wow, that is a little bit of input latency. I died to the bot. There was nothing I could do about that. That was... Whoa. I interrupted myself there. The point I was going to make is that we are running bots here. So that's putting some extra load on the Celeron. With like a fast modern CPU, that doesn't matter. It doesn't impact the frame rate pretty much at all. But with a system like this, where that's happening, it definitely impacts the frame rate. But let's see what happens to the frame rate as the match goes on. Because as the bots die off, there's less processing that's gonna happen. But while we wait for the bots to off each other, we have to talk about this display because it is wildly bad. I did some very professional measuries of the display and it did not go well. By modern standards, these results are abysmal. Now, if you don't understand these results, let me use this one graph to put the horridness into perspective. It measures how much the display deviates from the color that it's told to display. And these days, an average delta E of under 2 is very common, whereas that is a much bigger number. So yeah, the display is pretty much as terrible as you'd expect at this price point, but at least the webcam wasn't too bad. Okay, that looks like webcam to me. Again, you have to bear in mind, when I test these webcams, I am using like good light. Although, as you can tell, there's a pretty serious audio sync issue for some reason. So with that, let's see how much the performance has improved since the bots are all dead. And look at that, we're up to 12 frames per second. So with just 2 bots, we're almost getting full GPU utilization as well. I then tried turning on some Fidelity FX, which had an interesting result. I don't know, Fidelity FX has made it run worse somehow. I don't know how that's possible, but it looks terrible now. And it's even less playable. Does that make any sense? And even after all the bots killed each other, the situation barely improved. Oh yeah, I got him, but I think we may have traded. Am I also dead? We're gonna have to wait a moment to see. No, I've survived. Very good. Convinced I must have hurt the system's feelings with Fidelity FX, I turned it off to make sure it did actually run better before. Yeah, it's running better without Fidelity FX. That's so weird. I'm gonna plug it into a monitor so that we can hit up some 1080p, because according to the Fidelity FX results, the higher the resolution, the better it runs. So if we run it at 1440p, we're gonna get 100 frames per second by that logic. But the act of switching to an external display bewildered the little laptop, and talking it down took the 4th eternity of the video so far. Milana, it is now 3 weeks later, and we've relaunched it. Okay, so it's running on a bigger monitor, and we can, look at that, we can go all the way up to 4K if we want now, which should we try that? Okay, no, my theory hasn't quite checked out. Or is this running similarly? It's it's just a stuttery mess. Like, I don't know if this is better or worse than it was before. The only logical thing that's left to do is just turn it up to 4K. There's just been nothing for ages, and then that happens. There's also 2 MSI afterburners happening. Hey, the game's still running, and we're back down to 1 overlay, so that's progress. Although, it's not going great. Despite our CPU not being pegged at 100% utilization anymore, it seems like our iGPU's not having a great time, although it's still at lower utilization than the CPU. That is awesome. But after another couple minutes of sputtering around at 1 frame every couple of minutes, the game just kind of died. Oh wow, it just gave up. Okay. I don't think I've seen that happen before. Again, we've got another first here in terms of just horrendous performance. And the final CS2 related thing I did was dropped an 8 gig stick of RAM into that open slot we found earlier. And it performed a teeny bit better. It looks like it's running the same here, but when you look at the benchmarks, that number is definitely bigger. I then tried launching Doom Eternal and Cyberpunk, both of which just refused to launch. But GTA 5 did launch after about half an hour of waiting. I think we're supposed to be in a house here. Oh, cars. Yeah, okay, so we are officially outside now. This feels like that scene in The Matrix where they load up for one of the first fight scenes. Oh, I think there's a car here. Oh, please get into the car. Oh no, I wanted to get into the car before it loaded in. Oh, there's some more cars here. Okay, there's another invisible thing we've crashed into. And soon, I wasn't the only one doing some crashing. We just need to give it a moment. It's just trying to figure out how to load stuff in, I guess. I think it may have crashed, but I'm not sure. Again, I'm introducing my hand for context. Hey, 2 minutes later and we've got movement again. Very good. This combination of invisible environments and borderline crashes went on for half an hour, and then I just kind of gave up and moved on to the next game. Now finally, as is always the case with every dumpster poo-poo baby gaming device, we do need to try some Half-Life 2 on it. Now this is not running at 1080p, this is the native resolution of the laptop, and it's at like medium settings. And indoors, in this bit, we're getting 120-ish frames per second, which is honestly pretty bad. It's sub 60 frames per second. And again, this isn't even running at 1080p. It's especially shocking, considering that it's mostly due to the CPU. And I guess this exercise shows why laptops in this price point are usually Chromebooks, because non-Chromebook use cases kicks the hardware's teeth in. Even just basic Windows activities are super slow and frustrating on this laptop. Even with the RAM upgrade, that Celeron N4500 is a real piece of work. Which brings me to the end of another public flailing of an innocent device just trying its best. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. I'm super close to 700,000 subs. Hopefully that's the number that stops the shower crying. Fingers crossed. And until the next video, bye bye.